Have you ever seen something that you couldn't explain, something that felt so wrong it made you question your own sanity? I didn't think much of it when Olivia and I bought the painting at the estate sale. It was an antique, a Victorian-era portrait of a couple. Nothing unusual, just another piece to add to our growing collection of old art. We had recently moved into a charming but creaky house on the edge of town, and it felt like the perfect setting for the vintage pieces we both adored. The painting was framed beautifully, its gilded edges a touch worn, but still elegant. The couple in the portrait appeared to be at ease, their faces calm, their eyes gentle, yet there was something unsettling about their stillness. Maybe it was the way they were looking just beyond the edge of the frame as if waiting for something, or someone. We hung the painting above our fireplace, where it became a striking centerpiece in the living room. For a while, it was nothing more than an interesting conversation starter when friends came over. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I began to notice the subtle shifts in the painting. At first, I chalked it up to the angle of the room, the way the light from the fire flickered off the canvas, but the figures in the portrait seemed to be changing. Just a little at first, like the faintest movements of their eyes following us as we walked by. It wasn't unsettling at first, just a strange curiosity. But that feeling quickly faded, replaced by something much darker. One night, as Olivia and I sat on the couch after dinner, the warmth of the fire crackling between us, I glanced up at the painting. The man's hand, which had once rested still at his side, now twitched, barely noticeable but unmistakable. My eyes locked on it, my breath catching in my throat. Olivia caught my gaze and followed my eyes to the painting, but she saw nothing unusual. "It's just the light, Daniel," she said, her voice comforting but uncertain. But I knew what I had seen. The next evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I stood in front of the painting for what felt like an eternity, staring at the figures. The woman's face, which had once seemed serene and composed, now looked more strained, her eyes wide as if she were caught in a moment of fear. I looked at Olivia, who had come into the room behind me. "Are you seeing this?" I asked, my voice trembling. She nodded slowly, her expression furrowing with concern. "It's like they're alive." And then it began. The man's hand moved again, this time more than just a twitch. His fingers began to shift, curling slightly as if he was about to reach out. The woman's lips trembled as though she was trying to speak, but no words came. The entire room seemed to fall silent, the air thickening as though time had slowed. My heart raced, the sense of dread in my chest growing with each passing second. Over the following days, the changes became more pronounced. The figures in the painting weren't just moving, they were alive, acting out scenes that made my blood run cold. The woman's face contorted in silent anguish, her hands lifting toward the man, but he recoiled as if in terror, his once composed expression now one of horror. The entire scene was shifting into something violent, something twisted. The once peaceful portrait had become a silent nightmare, one that we couldn't escape. We tried to remove it from the wall, but no matter how hard we pulled, the painting wouldn't budge. It was as if it had fused with the house itself, a permanent part of the space. One night, we sat in front of the painting, unable to look away. The whispers started then. At first, they were faint, distant, like murmurs caught on the wind. But the closer we stared at the canvas, the louder the whispers became. The woman in the painting began to claw at the frame, her face twisted in terror as she looked at us, her mouth opening in a silent scream. The man beside her, once calm, was now caught in a frenzied, chaotic movement. He staggered backward, his body twisting unnaturally, as if he were trying to escape from something that wasn't visible. The air in the room turned cold, and the firelight flickered erratically, casting strange shadows that seemed to writhe along the walls. The whispers turned into a language we couldn't understand, growing louder and more desperate. It was then that I realized I wasn't just witnessing some supernatural anomaly. I was seeing something that had once been trapped, something that had been waiting to break free. The painting wasn't just a portrait, it was a portal, a prison for the souls of the figures within, bound by some ancient force that was now starting to unravel. We tried to ignore it. We tried to pretend that everything was normal, but the scenes grew more horrific by the night. The man in the portrait began to bleed from his eyes, the woman's mouth stretched wide in a grotesque scream. One night, I woke to find the man had stepped out of the frame. His face, pale and sickly, was pressed against the canvas, his hands reaching out as though he were trying to claw his way into our world. The painting was no longer just a work of art, it was becoming real, its horrors bleeding through the frame, spilling into our home. That's when it happened. I awoke one night to find Olivia standing in front of the painting, her eyes wide, staring into the canvas with a vacant expression. I called to her, but she didn't respond. It was as if she was in a trance, caught by the figure in the painting. The man's fingers twitched again, and this time they curled into a fist. His expression was twisted in anger. I grabbed Olivia's arm and tried to pull her away, but she resisted, her body stiff, her face contorted in a silent scream. And then the whispers became clear. They were calling her name. Olivia. The voice, a dark, guttural whisper, echoed in my ears as the woman in the painting turned her head slowly, her eyes meeting mine. The man followed suit, and the entire room seemed to shift around us. The walls closed in, the air grew thick with a malevolent force, and I realized then, the painting wasn't just a curse on them. It was a curse on anyone who dared to look upon it. I tried to scream, to pull Olivia away from the frame, but it was too late. As I watched in horror, the figures in the painting reached out, their hands stretching toward us. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the man's hand, now fully outside the frame, grabbing Olivia by the wrist, pulling her in. And now I'm trapped here with them. I can feel them, always watching, always waiting. The painting has claimed us. The whispers never stop. The man's hand still moves, and the woman's scream still echoes in my mind. The worst part is that I know they're not done yet. There are others. More souls trapped within the canvas, waiting for their turn. The painting moves always. It's waiting for you next.